The email popped up just as I finalized the closing documents for a biotech acquisition. It was December 22nd, and the Los Angeles skyline shimmered under the pale winter sun outside my office windows. Sienna, sweetie, about Christmas this year, with your brother Noah bringing his new fiancée. She's a film producer, you know. We thought it might be better if you skipped it this time. You understand, right? Love, Mom. I stared at the message, then let out a soft laugh. Tight. Dry. Resigned. 12 years, and nothing ever changed. Even after all I'd built, I was still the family's odd piece that didn't fit. What Mom didn't know was that the freelance consultant they'd brushed off was now Sienna Brooks, CEO of Crest Point Advisors. The firm quietly shaping billion-dollar deals across Asia, Europe, and North America. My assistant, Callie, buzzed through the intercom. The board from Avionics Gen is waiting on the video call. Thanks, Callie, I said, smoothing the crisp sleeves of my charcoal suit jacket. My family still believed I bought my clothes on clearance racks. I let them think so. 12 years ago, I'd stormed out of our Sacramento ranch house after refusing a junior executive role at Brooks & Sons Capital. You're making a huge mistake, my father had thundered. You think you're smarter than all of us. Noah, leaning back in his chair, arms folded, had smirked. Let her go try, she'll be back. I never returned. I had come to Los Angeles with nothing but an old laptop and an idea. From scratch, I built Crest Point into a force few even knew existed. Now, Crest Point quietly held stakes in half the enterprises my family's firm dealt with. A knock interrupted my thoughts. Ms. Brooks. Callie came in, holding a sleek folder. Here's the contract from Brooks & Sons Capital. They're ready for your signature. I smiled. So they'd come knocking after all. I picked up my pen, paused, and set it down. Actually, Callie, cancel it. Merry Christmas. The words tasted sweeter than champagne. Brooks & Sons Capital, my father's empire, had been desperate for an alliance with Crest Point. They still didn't know the firm belonged to the daughter they'd cast aside. My phone buzzed with a new email. Noah. Tiana. Mom told me about Christmas. Don't overthink it. You know how she is. Plus, Jasmine's career is very public. It's just simpler this way. Maybe, once you're established, things can go back to normal. Once I'm established, I echoed silently, staring at the 7-figure deal stacked in the folder on my desk. This partnership would open Brooks & Sons international operations, a lifeline they desperately needed. I'd seen the reports, how my father had been bragging to investors about this very deal. All it required now was one thing, my signature. Callie returned, holding an iPad. Your father's on Zoom. He wants to confirm tomorrow's contract ceremony. I nodded and tapped the screen to connect. Sienna Brooks speaking, I said, voice cool and professional. In business, I always used my mother's maiden name to stay invisible. Hey, everything, my father boomed, his tone overly cheerful, a sharp contrast to the man who once declared my startup a waste of time and talent. Just checking. We're all set for tomorrow, right? This deal means everything for our future. I thought of the Christmas dinners I wasn't invited to, of Noah's smug emails, of years spent invisible in my own family. Actually, Mr. Brooks, I said evenly, I've been reviewing the terms. I have some concerns. Concerns? His voice hitched, but everything was approved. Things change, I replied calmly. We should discuss it in person. Bring the whole family to the ceremony. Brooks & Sons is a family company, right? Of course, he stammered. My wife, Noah, Jasmine? All your children, Mr. Brooks, I said, my tone sharp as glass. A pause, then a quiet, well, Sienna's not really involved. All your children, I repeated. He exhaled. Understood. Good, I said, and ended the call. Tomorrow would be a reckoning. Once the Zoom screen disappeared, I leaned back in my chair, gazing out over the glittering Los Angeles skyline. Tomorrow my family would march into Crest Point's headquarters, expecting to meet a powerful but anonymous CEO. Instead, they'd come face to face with the daughter they'd dismissed and ignored. Callie appeared in the doorway again. Should I prepare the executive conference room for tomorrow? I nodded, running my fingers along the embossed contract. Yes, and Callie, make sure the photographers are ready. I want every single reaction captured. That night I stayed late, perfecting every detail. This wasn't merely a contract signing, it was the moment everything changed. My family always cared about appearances, but today they'd see what real power looked like, and Christmas, it would never look the same again. By 6 o'clock, I was already in my office. The 52nd floor conference room sparkled. Fresh white orchids lined the polished walnut table. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Los Angeles skyline, glowing gold in the dawn light. Callie entered, calm as ever. Your family's here. Should I bring them up? I checked my reflection in the glass. Gone were the soft sweaters and quiet flats they remembered. Today I wore a tailored charcoal Armani suit, sharp Louboutin heels, and my grandmother's vintage Cartier watch. The last gift from the woman who always believed in me. Let them wait, I said, adjusting my jacket. I'll make an entrance. 20 minutes later, I stood in my private elevator, watching the numbers rise. My phone buzzed. A message from my mother. Tiana, where are you? Your father says this meeting is crucial. Don't embarrass us. I smiled and slipped the phone into my pocket. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see them. Dad pacing, Mom adjusting Noah's tie, Jasmine practicing her smile, and the senator, already bored, flipping through contracts. I gave Callie a nod. She opened the doors. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced. Miss Sienna Brooks, CEO of Crest Point Advisors. The room went still. Electric tension hummed. As I stepped in, my heels clicked sharply on the marble floor. My mother's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering across the table. My father's face drained of color, anger turning into shock. But it was Noah's silence I'd remember. The arrogance wiped away. Good morning, everyone, I said, settling into the chair at the head of the table. Shall we begin? This is ridiculous, my father blurted. You're a freelance consultant. Am I? I lifted a black folder. Because these documents say I'm the CEO of the firm you've been chasing, Crest Point Advisors. The senator leaned forward, suddenly alert. I'm sorry, he said, frowning. What's going on? I turned to Jasmine with a polite smile. Oh, I'd have been introduced at Christmas dinner. Funny, I wasn't invited. Something about appearances. My mother opened her mouth. Tiana, sweetheart, this is a misunderstanding. Is it? I cut in, voice cold. I tapped a button. The screen lit up. Let's review. If you're ready to see how my family reacts when the truth lights up that screen, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of my story. Here's your message, Mom, telling me to skip Christmas. Here's Noah, claiming my career was just luck. And here, I tapped the screen again, is Dad, begging for this deal, completely unaware he's been negotiating with his own daughter. The room fell silent. Kelly moved quietly between chairs, placing fresh copies of the contracts in front of each guest. Dad flipped through his, panic creeping in. These aren't the same terms. They're different, I confirmed. I've made revisions. I've had 12 years to decide how I wanted today to unfold. Jasmine leaned forward. You can't do this. Brooks & Sons has plans, investors, expansions. Like the plans I had when I launched my firm alone? I cut in, voice steady. When I was dismissed at every holiday dinner? That was different, my mother whispered. We were protecting you from failure. No, I said, rising. You weren't protecting me, you were protecting your social status. I motioned to the city skyline blazing beyond the glass. Congratulations, today the world learns who the Brooks family really is. I stood straighter, adjusting the cuff of my blazer. The partnership is off, I declared, cool and final. Crest Point will acquire Avionics Gen directly, and as Dad's realizing, that blocks Brooks & Sons from Europe's market. My father slumped into his chair, the truth finally settling in. Without Crest Point's partnership, without capital for expansion, Brooks & Sons would remain a fading regional firm, propped up by appearances alone. You can't do this, he murmured. We're family. I paused at the doorway, then slowly turned back. Family? That's funny. Yesterday you told me I wasn't successful enough to be family. I tilted my head, feigning thought. I wonder, will I finally be invited to Christmas dinner now? And with that, I left. Silence fell behind me. Through the glass, I glimpsed my mother blotting tears, Dad staring at shredded contracts, and Noah, usually so confident, sitting slack-jawed. Ellie fell in beside me. That was intense. Are you okay? I glanced at my phone, another message blinking from Mom. Sienna, please come for Christmas. We need to fix this. I smiled faintly. Cancel Christmas dinner? I said. I've got better plans. I didn't respond. Crestpoint completed the avionics gen acquisition while Brooks & Sons stock began a slow, painful slide. The business headlines weren't gentle. Brooks & Sons reels from failed merger. Family-run firm loses ground. Crestpoint leads new AI supply chain expansion. A week later, I sat in my office, reviewing fresh acquisition proposals, when Callie appeared again. Your brother's here, she said softly. Third time this week. But he's alone. I pulled up the security feed. Noah stood in the lobby, shoulders slumped. This time, he wasn't wearing his usual polished grin. His tie hung loose, his eyes looked bruised from exhaustion. Something was different. He seemed defeated. Send him up, I told Callie after a pause. Noah stepped into my office slowly, taking in the space he'd never imagined his little sister ruling. The panoramic skyline behind me, modern art on the walls, the calm authority woven into every detail. Nice office, he murmured, voice low. Bigger than mine ever was at Brooks & Sons. Though I guess that doesn't mean much anymore. What do you want, Noah? I asked. He dropped into the chair across from me. For once, he didn't try to impress me. Jasmine called off the engagement. I lifted an eyebrow. Really? The perfect power couple couldn't handle a few headlines? She said she can't be tied to a sinking ship. He gave a thin, bitter laugh. Said I don't fit her image anymore. The irony sat heavy between us. Dad's drinking again, he continued quietly. The board's terrified. Mom can't show her face at the country club. Everything's coming apart. Because of me? I asked, my voice even. No, he admitted, shaking his head, because we built everything on appearances, just like my relationship. I nodded once. You all treated success like it had one look, and I never fit it. I deserved that, he whispered. You deserved a lot more, I said, my voice turning steel. Do you know what it felt like? Watching you all celebrate each other while acting like I didn't exist. Mom threw parties for every one of your promotions. She never even remembered what I did. We thought you were struggling. You never asked, I shot back, rising to my feet. Not once. In 12 years, none of you ever asked about my company, my team, my vision. You were too busy dismissing me to see I'd surpassed you all. His silence told me everything. Then, for the first time, real tears, not performative ones, welled in his eyes. I was awful to you. Yeah. Can you ever forgive me? Noah asked, voice shaking. I met his gaze steadily. Forgiveness isn't the issue, Noah. Trust is. And that's something you'll have to earn. Suddenly, the doors burst open. My parents strode in, ignoring Callie's protests. Sienna, my father snapped, though the thunder in his voice was gone. This has gone far enough. You've made your point. Oh? I replied calmly. And what point would that be? That you're successful, my mother said, breathless. That we were wrong, and we see you now, sweetheart. So please, she pleaded, stop punishing us. I let out a cold, humorless laugh. You think this is about revenge? Or proving I made it? I stood and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the glowing Los Angeles skyline. No, this is about consequences. About making it clear that your choices, your judgment, your arrogance have weight. We're your parents, my father said, his voice cracking. Everything we did, it was to protect you. I turned slowly to face them. No, everything you did was to protect your image. I held up my tablet, headlines glaring across the screen. Well, congratulations. That image is now shattered. A collapsing firm, a ruined engagement, and a family in pieces. What do you want from us? Noah asked quietly. What I wanted, I said, my voice low, was your belief while I was building Crest Point. Your respect when I succeeded. To be treated like family, not like a mistake. I paused, letting the silence stretch. But now, I don't want anything. Tears began to slide down my mother's cheeks. I didn't flinch. I'd seen those tears before. When I didn't choose the right college. When I didn't take the job at Brooks & Sons. When I disappointed the family. Oh, Sienna, it's almost Christmas, she whispered. Ah, yes, I said coolly. The Christmas dinner I was too much of a failure to attend. I tilted my head. Tell me, do you still care about appearances? Or did that vanish when your golden boy fell apart? My father stepped closer. Just tell us, board seats, equity, a public statement, name it. I shook my head. You still don't get it. I don't want what you have. I softened my voice. Crest Point is worth 10 times what Brooks & Sons ever was. What I wanted was a family who valued me, not for what I could do, but for who I am. I pressed the intercom. Callie, please escort them out and update the security list. Sienna, please, my mother whispered. We can fix this. No, Mom. You don't fix 12 years of being dismissed with a rushed apology. As the door closed behind them, I sat in the quiet, city lights glittering below. Then my phone buzzed. Heard what happened. Your grandmother would be proud. Christmas dinner's at my place this year. Margaret? I smiled, for real this time. This year I'd spend Christmas where I truly belonged. A quiet warmth spread through me, as if a weight had finally lifted. Sometimes, family isn't blood. It's those who believe in you when no one else does. The next morning, I gathered my executive team at Crest Point Advisors. It was time. We were launching our boldest vision yet, a complete shakeup of the consulting industry, beginning with the acquisition of 3 mid-tier firms across the West Coast. Brooks & Sons wasn't on that list. As I stood before the board, presenting our plan, my thoughts flickered briefly to the Christmas dinner unfolding in my parents' home. The glossy table, the curated wine, the hollow toasts, all of it clinging to an illusion crumbling piece by piece. Meanwhile, I was building something real. A week later, Callie placed a small package on my desk. Inside lay my grandmother's old leather business card holder and a handwritten note from Margaret. She always said you'd outshine them all. Looks like she was right. I set it beside my nameplate, a quiet reminder that success isn't defined by who shows up once you've arrived, but by who stood by you while you were still climbing. My family had fought to preserve their image. They got one, but not the one they expected. And me, I had the life I'd earned, respected, fulfilled, and completely free. So when someone asked me, "Do you ever miss your family?" I smiled, turned back to my desk, and said, "I have a company to run. That's worth more than any seat at their table." If you've ever been underestimated or told you weren't enough, this story is for you. I didn't build my life to prove them wrong. I built it to prove to myself that I was right to trust the quiet fire inside me. If my story resonates, leave a comment and share what you've overcome. Or simply say, "I see you." Because sometimes, that's everything. You don't need their table, build your own, and one day, they'll wish they had a seat there. If my journey struck a chord with you, share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear your story. Tell me how you've stood your ground or built your own table. Remember, believing in yourself isn't arrogance, it's survival. Let's remind each other that quiet strength changes everything. I see you.